Welcome to Sage-Adek, the place where stories come alive. Whether you're here to escape, to be inspired, or to simply enjoy a great tale, you're in for something special. Each story is crafted to entertain, intrigue, and leave you wanting more. So sit back, relax, and let the journey begin. After days of searching, eventually, Chemisola's mother came upon Jessica, Hope, and Ife, who were chatting quietly by the village square. "Girls," Chemisola's mother called out, her voice filled with desperation, "you were with Chemisola at the festival, weren't you? Where is she? Why hasn't she come home?" The girls looked at each other, quickly putting on expressions of concern. Ife stepped forward, speaking carefully. "Yes, we were with her," she said, "but after a while, she wandered off. We thought she would be right behind us." Jessica nodded, her face serious. "We figured she stayed behind to enjoy the festival a bit longer. She seemed to be having a good time." Ife added, "We didn't think anything of it, Ma. She seemed fine, and we assumed she'd come home on her own." Chemisola's mother's face fell, her eyes filling with tears. "But Chemisola isn't like that," she said. "She wouldn't wander off alone, not without telling us." The villagers around them began to murmur, each person concerned and saddened by the news of Chemisola's disappearance. Chemisola was loved by everyone in the village, and the thought of her being lost or in danger filled their hearts with worry. One of the older women in the crowd spoke up, her voice low and troubled. "Maybe something happened to her by the river. That place has always had strange stories surrounding it." Another villager nodded, his face grim. "It's possible that something mystical has taken her. There are things in this world we cannot explain." As the whispers spread, Chemisola's parents grew more and more distressed. Her father, trying to stay strong, put his arm around his wife, who was trembling with grief. "She'll come back," he said. "She has to. Chemisola is a smart girl. She'll find her way home." But days passed, and still, there was no sign of Chemisola's return. Her mother became pale and weary, her eyes bagged from sleepless nights spent searching and waiting. She would often sit outside their house, gazing at the path, hoping that her daughter would come walking up to her with that familiar bright smile. But each night ended in sorrow as Chemisola remained lost. The village mourned Chemisola's absence deeply, with people whispering prayers for her safe return and lighting small candles outside their homes in her memory. Some villagers believed she had met with an unfortunate accident, while others suspected that mystical forces had taken her. Meanwhile, Jessica, Ife, and Hope continued their lives as if nothing had happened. They pretended to share in the village's grief, offering comforting words to Chemisola's parents, helping search along the paths, and speaking kindly of Chemisola whenever they were asked. But in truth, they were enjoying the new attention from the young men in the village, who now took notice of them. However, as rumors grew and whispers spread, the girls began to feel a faint unease. They decided to return to the river, hoping to make sure that no trace of their betrayal remained. As they reached the riverbank, they looked around carefully, scanning the quiet, dark water and reassuring themselves that their secret was hidden well. But then, a soft sound caught their attention. Perched on a tree branch above the river was a little parrot singing a sad, haunting melody. The girls paused, listening carefully, and their hearts turned cold as they realized what the bird was singing. The parrot's song seemed to echo their actions, each line of its mournful tune revealing pieces of the terrible truth of what they had done to Chemisola. The girls looked at one another in horror, realizing that if anyone heard the parrot's song, their secret would be uncovered. Without a word, Hope, Ife, and Jessica made a quick decision. They picked up stones from the riverbank and began throwing them at the bird, desperate to silence it forever. The bird fluttered and dodged, but eventually one of their stones hit its chest. The parrot's song stopped abruptly, and the small creature fell silent, disappearing into the shadows of the trees. The girls breathed a sigh of relief, certain they had erased the last trace of their secret. Days passed and Chemisola's parents continued to search, tirelessly, their hope fading, but their love for their daughter grew stronger as each day passed. They walked the village, paths calling her name and asking everyone they met if they had seen any sign of her. They were met with pitying looks and sad shakes of the head. And yet they kept searching, refusing to One evening, as they were returning home with heavy hearts, a faint sound caught their attention. It was the soft, broken chirping of a little parrot hidden in the bushes by the side of the path. The bird's feathers were ruffled, and it looked weak, struggling to keep itself upright. Kemisola's parents stopped, surprised to see a bird in such a state. They knelt down to look closer, and to their astonishment, the bird began to speak. With a trembling voice, the parrot sang a sad, haunting tune, its melody filled with sorrow and pain. Slowly, its words became clearer, and Kemisola's parents listened with growing shock as the bird recounted everything it had witnessed at the river. Through its broken song, the parrot revealed how Jessica, Ife, and Hope had led Kemisola across the river, knowing full well about the mermaid's rule but keeping it a secret from her. It told them how, on the way back to the village, the three girls had packed food for themselves as an offering but had deliberately refused to give Kemisola any. When she begged for help, the parrot's song painted a vivid picture of how Kemisola had pleaded for their kindness, only to be met with cruel laughter as the girls walked away, leaving her alone to face the wrath of the mermaid. Kemisola's parents felt a surge of anger and disbelief as they listened. They could hardly believe what they were hearing. They had always thought of Hope, Jessica, and Ife as friends to their daughter, never suspecting that they were capable of such betrayal. Tears filled Kemisola's mother's eyes as she imagined her daughter's fear and helplessness at that moment. Kemisola's father clenched his fists, his heart filled with grief and rage. The parrot, seeing the pain on their faces, struggled to speak once more. "I saw it all. Kemisola is lost beneath the river, taken by the mermaid because of those girls' wickedness. But there may still be a way. Follow me to the river. If you have the courage, there may be a chance to save her." Kemisola's parents exchanged a determined look, their grief hardening into resolve. They would not abandon their daughter, no matter how impossible the task seemed. Wiping away her tears, Kemisola's mother nodded, and her father placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. They were ready to do whatever it took to bring their daughter back, no matter the cost. The parrot led them through the village and down the path toward the river, guiding them as best as it could despite its injuries. The journey was long and filled with silence, the weight of their emotions pressing heavily upon them. Finally, they reached the edge of the dark, silent river, its waters calm and deep under the evening sky. As they stood there, staring at the water where their daughter had vanished, they felt both fear and hope. The river had taken their beloved child, and now they were ready to face whatever lay beneath its surface to bring her back. The river was known for its mysteries, but their love for Kemisola was stronger than any fear or doubt. They would face the mermaid and bring Kemisola home. Their voices trembled as they called out into the silence, "O great mermaid of the river! We beg you, please return our daughter to us. She is our only child, our joy and light. We cannot live without her." For a long moment, the river remained calm and quiet, but then ripples spread across the water, and a figure began to emerge. The mermaid, her hair dark and flowing like the currents of the river, rose from the depths. Her piercing eyes fixed upon them. Beside her, standing in silence with a hollow expression, was Kemisola. Now dressed in simple clothes and with an empty look in her eyes, she looked tired and worn, her once bright spirit dulled by the weight of her servitude. "Your daughter is mine now," the mermaid said coldly. "She crossed my waters without offering an offering, and now she serves me. Such is the law of the river." Kemisola's parents fell to their knees, pleading, "Please, we beg you. She is our only child and we cannot live without her. Our hearts cannot bear this loss. Please have mercy." The mermaid tilted her head, considering their words. After a moment, her lips curved into a faint, almost cruel smile. "If you truly want her back, then you must prove the depth of your love. Cross this river without any support, no bridge, no boat, and no help. If you succeed, I will set her free. But if you fail, you will remain here, bound to me as my servants, just as she is." The parents exchanged a fearful glance. They knew how deep and dangerous the river was, and the challenge seemed impossible. But they were prepared to try anything to save their daughter. Together, they joined hands and bowed their heads, praying silently to the gods for guidance and strength. As they stepped toward the river, A murmur spread among the villagers who had gathered nearby. Word of the parents' ordeal had spread quickly, and many of the villagers had come to watch, their hearts filled with sympathy and support. Some of them began to call out words of encouragement, their voices ringing out over the water. "Stay strong," one elder shouted. "Your love will guide you through." Meanwhile, news of the ordeal reached Jessica, Ife, and Hope. Realizing that their cruel scheme had been exposed, the three girls panicked. Fearful of the villagers' judgment and punishment, they fled into the forest, hoping to hide from the truth they could no longer escape. But as they wandered deeper into the thick trees, they soon found themselves lost and frightened. Shadows seemed to close in around them, and the dense, dark forest became a prison they could not escape. In their fear, the girls began to curse Chemisola, blaming her for everything. "If it weren't for her, we wouldn't be in this mess," Hope hissed bitterly. "Why couldn't she just stay out of our way?" Ife muttered. "She ruined everything," Jessica added, her voice shaking with anger and fear. Back at the river, the gathered villagers watched as Chemisola's parents prepared to take their first steps into the water. Their prayers and chants grew louder, filling the air with a sense of unity and hope. Chemisola's parents took strength from the support of their village, their hearts steady as they stepped into the water, determined to face whatever lay ahead. The river was cold and deep, and with each step, they felt the currents trying to pull them under. But they held on to each other, their love and commitment unshaken. They continued forward, their steps slow and careful as the water rose higher around them. They prayed silently. Just when it seemed as though they could go no further, a sudden wind swept across the river, gentle but strong. It wrapped around them like a protective force, steadying their steps and guiding them forward. The villagers gasped in awe, sensing that a miracle was unfolding before their eyes. With the help of the magical wind, Chemisola's parents crossed the river, their love and courage shining brightly for all to see. When they reached the other side, the mermaid watched them in silence, her expression softening as she took in the sight of their unwavering devotion. Moved by their courage and the depth of their love, the mermaid's cold gaze melted, and a hint of compassion appeared in her eyes. She nodded slowly, a hint of respect in her voice. "Your love has proven true. I release your daughter." With a wave of her hand, the mermaid freed Chemisola from her servitude. Chemisola's eyes filled with tears of relief and joy as she ran into her parents' arms. They held each other tightly, their hearts overflowing with love and gratitude. The villagers cheered, their voices echoing through the air as they celebrated Chemisola's return. Together, Chemisola and her parents made their way back to the village, surrounded by the warmth and support of their community. They were finally whole again, and the love that had guided them through their darkest moments would continue to protect and strengthen them in the days to come. The day after Chemisola's return was filled with joy and relief, but also with a quiet sorrow. The story of her ordeal spread through the village, reaching every corner and every heart. As people heard about how her friends had tricked Chemisola, leaving her to suffer at the mercy of the mermaid, they were shocked and saddened. The villagers, who had once thought of the three girls as friends and neighbors, now looked upon them with disbelief and anger. That anyone could be so driven by jealousy was a painful reminder of the dangers that envy could bring. The matter was soon brought before the king, who was both angered and disappointed by the betrayal. He called for the girls to be brought to his court, where they stood in silence, their heads hung low as they faced the weight of their actions. The entire village gathered to watch, their eyes filled with disappointment and grief for what these young women had done. The king's voice boomed through the hall, filled with stern authority as he began. "You have betrayed not only Chemisola, but the trust of this entire village. You allowed jealousy to consume your hearts and plotted against an innocent girl, bringing sorrow upon her family and fear upon our village. Such actions cannot go unpunished." The girls said nothing, their faces pale as they listened to the king's words. They knew there was no excuse for what they had done. As their eyes scanned the crowd, they could see the faces of the villagers they had once laughed and talked with, now looking upon them with a mixture of sadness and anger. The king continued, his voice unwavering. "As punishment for your betrayal, you will be publicly humiliated for all to witness, and you will be banished from this village." You shall never return. Let this be a lesson for all who let envy poison their hearts." The girls were led through the village, their heads bowed in shame as the villagers watched in silence. Some people shook their heads in disappointment, while others looked away, saddened by what had become of them. The girls had lost everything, and they knew they had only themselves to blame. Once the girls left, the village turned its focus back to a celebration of joy and relief. Kemisola was safe, her family was whole again, and the painful memory of betrayal was replaced by a renewed sense of unity. The villagers gathered to rejoice at Kemisola's return, filling the air with laughter and music. Friends and neighbors came to Kemisola's home, bringing gifts and offering words of kindness, happy to see her safe and sound. There was a warmth in the air, a reminder of the power of love, honesty, and family bonds. Later, Kemisola, feeling a sense of gratitude, decided to visit the river once more. She wanted to thank the mermaid whose change of heart had given her a second chance at life. With a small offering in hand, she walked to the edge of the river and called out softly, "Great mermaid of the river, I have come to thank you." Slowly, the water rippled, and the mermaid emerged, her expression calm yet thoughtful. Kemisola looked at her with respect, noticing a softness in her eyes that had not been there before. "I see you have returned," the mermaid said, her voice less cold than it had been before. "What brings you back here, child?" "I came to thank you," Kemisola replied. "Your mercy allowed me to return to my family, and I am forever grateful." The mermaid looked at Kemisola for a long moment, a wistful expression crossing her face. She sighed, glancing down at the water as if remembering something long forgotten. "Once, I was like you," she began, her voice laced with sadness. "I was a young maiden, filled with hopes and dreams. I fell in love with a handsome man from a faraway village, but his mother, who was a powerful witch, despised me and cursed me to this river, where I would remain forever." Kemisola listened in silence, her heart aching for the mermaid's sorrow. "Over time, my bitterness grew," the mermaid continued. "I watched people pass by, loved ones and families, and I began to resent them, for I had lost my own chance at love and happiness. My heart became hardened, and I vowed to punish anyone who crossed my waters without honoring my rule." The mermaid looked at Kemisola, her gaze softening. "But when I saw how deeply your parents loved you, how they were willing to risk everything to bring you back, it touched something in me that I thought had died long ago. Their love reminded me that maybe, just maybe, not everyone in this world is cruel. There are still hearts filled with kindness and sacrifice." Kemisola felt a tear slip down her cheek. She had never known that the mermaid carried such pain. "Thank you for sharing your story," she said softly. "I will never forget what you did for me." The mermaid nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "Go now, Kemisola, and live a life of love and kindness. Cherish your family, for that love is more powerful than any curse or spell." With those final words, the mermaid sank back into the river, disappearing into its depths. Kemisola stood there for a moment, a feeling of peace settling over her. She knew that the mermaid's heart had softened, even if only slightly, and she hoped that one day the river spirit might find peace herself. The village celebration continued in full swing, with songs and laughter filling the air as everyone rejoiced in Kemisola's safe return. People gathered around her, congratulating her on her bravery and marveling at her story. Among the crowd, a young man approached, dressed in fine clothes that hinted at nobility. He moved confidently, yet his face softened as he caught sight of Kemisola. It was the village prince, who came to join in the celebration after hearing of the incredible events that had taken place. As he drew closer, he paused, recognizing Kemisola as the same beautiful girl he had met at the festival. She had never left his mind since that day, her gentle spirit and captivating smile lingering in his thoughts. Now, standing before him, she looked even more beautiful, with a grace and strength that seemed to shine from within. "Kemisola," he said softly, a smile spreading across his face. "It is you." Kemisola looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Amos," she gasped, recognizing him immediately as the kind young man she had met at the festival. The prince nodded, taking her hand in his. "Yes, my real name is Prince Amos. I came to the festival in disguise, hoping to meet the villagers without them knowing who I was. But you were unforgettable. I've thought of you every day since we met." Kemisola blushed, her heart fluttering as she remembered their time together. Prince Amos looked at her with admiration, his gaze filled with respect and affection. "Your story has touched me deeply," he said. "Your courage, your kindness, and the love your family has shown. I have seen that your heart is noble and true, and I would be honored if you would marry me, Kemisola." The crowd erupted into cheers, thrilled by the prince's proposal. Kemisola's parents, filled with joy, nodded in support, their eyes shining with pride. Kemisola, overcome with emotion, smiled and gave her answer. "Yes, Prince Amos," she whispered, her voice full of happiness. "I would be honored to marry you." The village prepared a grand wedding for them, a joyous ceremony filled with flowers, music, and blessings. The villagers danced and celebrated, grateful for Kemisola's safe return and for the hope her story had brought to their community. Kemisola and Amos exchanged their vows under the bright sun, surrounded by family and friends who wished them happiness and love. After the wedding, Kemisola shared the mermaid's story with Prince Amos, telling him of the sorrow and bitterness that had trapped her in the river. The prince listened intently, his heart moved by the tale of the once beautiful maiden who had been cursed to live in the water. Inspired by Kemisola's compassion, Prince Amos decided that he would do everything in his power to help lift the mermaid's curse. He called upon the chief priest of the kingdom, asking him to perform the necessary rituals to break the curse. With the guidance of the gods, the priest prepared the rites, offering prayers and making sacred offerings at the riverbank. The villagers gathered once more, watching in hope as the chief priest chanted and invoked blessings upon the river, seeking to end the mermaid's suffering. As the final words of the ritual were spoken, the waters of the river began to shimmer, and a soft light rose from beneath the surface. The mermaid emerged, her face transformed from sadness to a peaceful smile. Her scales gleamed like jewels, and her eyes were filled with a warmth that had not been there before. The curse was broken, and she was free at last. "Thank you, Kemisola," the mermaid said, her voice soft with gratitude. "Your kindness has given me a second chance." With one last look of thanks, the mermaid disappeared beneath the water, her spirit finally at peace. The river calmed, its waters glistening under the sun, and the villagers cheered, knowing that their village was now free from the mermaid's torments. Kemisola and Prince Amos returned to the village as beloved members, cherished by everyone for their bravery and kindness. In time, Kemisola and Amos built a life filled with love, laughter, and joy. They honored their families and served their people with kindness and humility. Peace returned to the village, and the river remained calm, a reminder of the power of forgiveness and the strength of true love. And so, Kemisola and her family, along with the entire village, lived happily ever after, their hearts forever touched by the story of the mermaid, the strength of family bonds, and the joy of new beginnings. Thank you for joining me on this storytelling adventure. If you find my stories valuable, don't forget to let me know by liking the video and leaving a comment. Your thoughts mean the world to me. And here's a tip. You might not find me again in the vast sea of YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let us reach 1,000 subscribers together, that way I would be able to continue dropping mind-blowing stories. And you will also be part of my growth. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep imagining, and stay curious. Thank you.